I want to start with a bit of a riddle because I've been looking through this stack of research you sent over, and I feel like I'm looking at two completely different files that just got stapled together by accident.
It does feel a bit like that at first glance, doesn't it? A little jarring.
Jarring is putting it mildly. On one hand, I have all these reports about the stone of heaven, a material so precious that Chinese emperors valued it more than gold. You know, it's the symbol of virtue, it's in museums, carved into these breathtaking statues. It's the ultimate treasure.
And on the other hand,
I have government toxicology reports. I have pictures of people in hazmat suits. I've got warnings about a regulated industrial hazard that if you breathe it in can literally destroy your lungs. A toxic liability.
and the kicker
It's
is,
the same material.
it is. We are absolutely dealing with a massive paradox today.
We're talking about actinolite. And our mission today is to figure out how one single mineral can be this stone of heaven in one form and a deadly hazard in another. Because looking at the chemistry, the line between a beautiful gemstone and a carcinogen seems terrifyingly thin.
It is thin, but it's also very, very distinct if you know what to look for. And that's really the goal of this deep dive. We're going to unpack the mineralogy, the history, and the toxicology to understand the two faces of actinolite.
Okay, so let's start at the bedrock then. I'm looking at the chemical breakdown here, and it's classified as an amphibole silicate. Now, I know silicate covers a huge amount of ground in geology, but amphibole, that feels specific. What are we actually looking at?
You're right to flag amphibole. It's a whole group of minerals. And to really get actinolite, you have to stop thinking of minerals as like a fixed recipe and start thinking of them as a spectrum. In geology, we call this a solid solution series.
Okay, walk me through that. I'm sort of picturing a slider on a mixing board.
That is a perfect analogy. Imagine that slider. On the far left side, you have a mineral called tremolite.
Mm-hmm.
And tremolite is super rich in magnesium with almost no iron.
And because it lacks iron, it's white.
Exactly. It's usually white or creamy or even colorless. So that's one end of the spectrum.
So what happens if I slide that fader all the way to the right?
Well, if you push that slider to the other extreme, you're swapping out all that magnesium for iron, and you get ferro-actinolite. It's dark, almost black, because iron is such a powerful pigment.
And actinolite is the middle ground.
Precisely. Actinolite is that whole zone in the middle of the fader. It's the intermediate member. It is a mix of both magnesium and iron. And because iron is a chromophore, a color-causing agent, as you slide from the magnesium end towards the iron end, you start picking up that distinct green.
So the more iron, the deeper the green.
You've got it.
I was looking up the etymology because the name usually gives you a clue. It comes from the Greek actus, right? Meaning ray or beam, which is a bit confusing because when I think beam, I think of, light. But the pictures show these weird spiky clusters.
That's the ray they're talking about.
Yeah.
It refers to the crystal habit. When actinolite forms, it rarely makes a nice blocky cube like, say, pyrite. It almost always wants to grow in these radiating fibrous clusters, like a starburst or a spray of needles shooting out from a center point.
That fibrous nature seems to be the key theme here. There's a variety mentioned in the notes called bisolite, and the description is, well, the sources call it hairy.
It is incredibly strange stuff.
Yeah.
Bisolite is a variety where the crystals are so fine and matted together they look like flax or stiff hair. You didn't even think it was a rock.
And there's a note here about witch's finger quartz. Is that related?
It is, and collectors go crazy for this stuff. Sometimes a clear quartz crystal will grow over these hairy bisolite needles. So you end up with this pristine, transparent crystal that looks like it has dark green or black goblin hairs trapped inside it.
That is a vivid image. And then there's mountain leather. I pulled up a picture and I honestly thought it was a mistake. It looks like an old, dirty cloth you'd find in a garage.
It's so deceptive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mountain leather is basically a sheet of interwoven actinolite fibers. It feels soft, it's flexible, you can actually bend it, but it's stone.
And this is where I want to pause for a second because this fibrous quality, this tendency to form long, thin, flexible strands, that seems to be the key to the whole story.
It's the golden thread, both literally and figuratively. That fibrous structure is what makes it a gem, and as we're about to see, it's also what makes it a killer.
Let's pivot to the pretty side first, the gem. I think most people have heard of jade, but they probably haven't heard of actinolite.
Right, and that's because jade is a trade name. It's not a scientific one. It's a bucket term for two completely different minerals. You have jadeite, which is a pyroxene, and then you have nephrite, which is an amphibole.
And nephrite is our guy.
Nephrite is essentially a rock made up of countless interlocked fibrous crystals of the Tremolite Actinolite series. So if you're holding a piece of Nephrite Jade, you are holding a chunk of Actinolite.
Okay, so if I buy a green jade bangle, I'm buying iron-rich actinolite. If I buy a white one, I'm buying magnesium-rich tremolite. But here's what I don't get. We usually think of gemstones as being really hard, diamonds, rubies. But looking at the Mohs hardness scale, actinolite is only a 5.5 or a 6. That's mediocre.
It's soft. You could scratch it with a kitchen knife. A piece of quartz sand could scratch it.
So why on earth was it treasured for thousands of years if it scratches that easily?
Because there's a massive difference between hardness and toughness. Hardness is just your resistance to being scratched. Toughness is your resistance to breaking.
Give me a real-world comparison.
Okay, think about a diamond. Hardest material on Earth, right? But it's brittle. If you put a diamond on an anvil and hit it with a hammer, it'll shatter into dust. Yeah. It has cleavage planes. It wants to snap.
And nephrite.
If you put a block of good quality nephrite on that anvil and hit it with a hammer, the hammer will bounce back. It might even ring like a bell.
Seriously, a rock that bounces a hammer.
It's tougher than steel. And it all comes back to those fibers we were talking about. In nephrite, the actinolite fibers aren't parallel. They're felted. They are twisted and interlocked in this microscopic mat. So when you strike it, the energy of the blow doesn't have a clean path to travel. It just gets dissipated in that tangle.
That makes perfect sense. It's like trying to tear a piece of felt versus tearing a sheet of paper.
Exactly. And that toughness is why long before it was jewelry, it was a tool. Prehistoric people used it for axe heads and chisels because you could pound it against a tree all day and it would not chip.
We even see that in the names for the different varieties. The notes mention mutton fat jade, which I have to say is not the most appealing name.
It implies a very specific texture, doesn't it? It's the classic Chinese term for that pure white, magnesium-rich tremolite. It has this greasy, almost oily, luster-like congealed fat. It sounds gross to a modern ear, maybe, but historically that greasiness was the height of beauty. It felt soft.
And I'm guessing spinach jade is the green stuff.
Right, that's your iron-rich actinolite.
I also saw chicken bone jade. Who is naming these?
It's so descriptive. Chicken bone usually refers to jade that's been buried in a tomb or even burned. The surface calcifies and turns this chalky white or brown, and it looks just like an old dry bone.
There's one more variety we have to cover, and it goes back to the fibers again. Cat's eye actinolite.
Ah, this is a rare treat. So we just said that nephrite is a tangled mess of fibers. But sometimes nature aligns all the actinolite fibers so they're perfectly parallel, like a bundle of uncooked spaghetti.
And that creates the eye.
Exactly. If you cut that parallel structure into a rounded gem, a cabochon, light reflects off the sides of all those fibers and creates a single moving slit of light that glides across the surface.
The notes had a correction here. It said people often call it cat's eye jade, but that's not quite right.
It's a bit of a trade semantics issue. True nephrite is felted and tangled. If the fibers are parallel enough to show a clean eye, it's not really nephrite anymore. It's just Chadoyan actinolite. But, try explaining that to a jeweler who wants to sell cat's eye jade.
Fair enough.
Well,
Let's move to the history, because the cultural weight of this stone is just huge. And it starts with the name nephrite itself. I was surprised this had a medical origin.
it does. It comes from lapis nephriticus in Latin, which is derived from the Greek nephros.
Which means kidney.
Correct. The kidney stone.
That is deeply ironic, given what we're going to talk about later.
The doctrine of signatures was a huge belief system in the past. The idea that a plant or rock looked like the body part it was meant to cure. People thought these smooth, polished pebbles of jade looked like kidneys. So from Mesoamerica to Europe, people would wear it or place it on their body to cure kidney ailments.
So the stone we now know can destroy lungs was originally named for its supposed ability to heal kidneys.
History loves its ironies. But nowhere was this reverence higher than in China.
The imperial gem.
It's hard for us to overstate this. In the West, we obsessed over gold and diamonds. In ancient China, it was all about jade. It was valued above everything. Confucius famously compared the properties of jade to the virtues of a gentleman. Its gloss was benevolence. Its toughness was integrity.
And they were literally pulling this out of rivers, right? The notes mention the White Jade River and the Black Jade River.
The Urunkash and the Karakash in Khotan. For centuries, they didn't really mind it from the mountains. They just waited for the rivers to wash the boulders down. You'd have people wading into freezing water, feeling with their bare feet for that specific greasy texture of river-polished actinolite.
That tactile connection is amazing. But let's jump south to New Zealand, because the Maori relationship with this stone Pounamu, it feels different. It feels more martial.
It is different. In New Zealand, Pounamu or Greenstone is absolutely central to the culture. The South Island is literally named Te Wai Pounamu, the land of greenstone water.
And the notes talk about the mere, which is a type of club. This goes right back to that toughness we talked about.
Exactly. The mere is this short, flat club, almost shaped like a giant teardrop. Because of that interlocking fiber structure, you could grind the edge to be incredibly thin and sharp enough to slice. But the body of the club was strong enough to crack a skull without shattering the weapon.
That is a terrifying combination of physics and warfare.
But it wasn't just a weapon. It was a twanga, a treasure. These items were believed to absorb the mana, the prestige of the ancestors who wielded them. So if you held a mirror that belonged to a great chief, you weren't just holding a rock, you were holding his power.
A vessel for history. Now, speaking of history, there's a fantastic modern story in the notes about Taiwan. Apparently, for a long time, they didn't even realize they were sitting on a massive jade mine.
This is one of my favorite stories in mineralogy. Go back to 1932. Taiwan is under Japanese occupation. The Japanese miners are in the Hualien area, but they are not looking for jade. They're looking for asbestos.
Uh-oh. That gives us a hint about what's coming next.
Right, so they found asbestos, but they kept running into this tough green rock that was in the way. They thought it was just waste, so they were blasting it out and dumping tons of it down the mountainside.
They were throwing away the jade to get to the asbestos.
Tons of it. It wasn't until 1956, long after the war, that a geology student named Liao Shui-Cheng was identifying local minerals and realized, wait a minute, this waste is high-quality nephrite.
That must have triggered a gold rush. Or, well, a jade rush.
It was huge. By the 60s and 70s, Taiwan was producing something like 80% of the world's jade. It flooded the market. If you bought a cheap jade souvenir in a gift shop back then, it was almost certainly Taiwan actinolite.
And they have a special type called dragon vein, right?
That's the really premium stuff.
Yeah.
It's this geological oddity where you have layers of the common waxy jade alternating with layers of that cat's eye parallel fiber jade. When you polish it, it looks like rippling water or dragon scales.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It sounds it, but we have to turn the page. We've talked about the ray, the imperial gem, the stone of heaven. Now we have to talk about the hazard.
The beast.
The asbestos connection. Now, I think this confuses a lot of people because we use asbestos as a noun like it's a single thing. There is asbestos in the walls, but you're saying actinolite is asbestos.
This is where we have to be very precise. Asbestos is a commercial and regulatory term, not a mineral species. It describes a group of minerals that grow in a very specific habit-long, thin, flexible fibers that can be easily separated. Actinolite is one of the 6 minerals regulated as asbestos when it occurs in that form.
Okay, so the distinction is the form. If I have a jade bangle, the fibers are all locked together in that felted mat.
Correct. We call that the massive habit. It's a solid block.
But if I find actinolite growing in a different way in a mine?
It can form in the asbestiform habit. And this is where the fibers are loose. They are microscopic, they can float in the air, and they are incredibly dangerous when inhaled.
Let's talk about Libby, Montana, because this is where the theory becomes a real human tragedy.
It's a terrible tragedy. Libby was home to a massive mine for vermiculite, a harmless mineral used in potting soil and insulation. But geology is messy. The vermiculite ore body was contaminated with veins of these amphiboles.
Including actinolite.
A mix. Windshite, ricturite, and actinolite, they call it Libby amphibole. And because they were blasting and crushing the vermiculite, they were releasing this fibrous actinolite dust into the air. It covered the town for decades.
And the health consequences were just devastating.
Mesothelioma, asbestosis, the rates of lung disease there were off the charts. And it comes back to the chemistry. We said earlier that actinolite is tough and chemically resistant. It doesn't dissolve in acid. It doesn't burn.
Which makes it great for insulation.
But makes it an absolute nightmare for the human body.
Why? What happens when you breathe it in?
Okay, so imagine a microscopic spear. You inhale an actinolite fiber, and it gets deep into your lungs. Your body's defense system, the macrophages, comes along to clean it up. They try to engulf the fiber to dissolve it.
Like they would with a bacteria or some normal dust.
Exactly. But they can't dissolve actinolite. It's a rock. It's acid resistant. So the macrophage dies, releasing enzymes that cause inflammation and scarring. Then another macrophage comes along and tries, and it dies too. This cycle continues for decades, causing scar tissue and genetic damage that eventually can lead to cancer.
It's biopersistent.
That's the medical term. It just stays there forever.
That is a very heavy reality to reconcile with the stone of heaven. I want to be really clear for anyone listening who might be looking at their jewelry box with suspicion right now. If they have a polished nephrite pendant or a cat's eye ring, are they in danger?
No, absolutely not. You are safe. The fibers in gem quality jade are locked in tight. They aren't going anywhere. You could wear it every single day for 100 years and be perfectly fine.
But if you're a hobbyist carver, if you're cutting it,
That's completely different. If you take a piece of raw jade and put it against a grinding wheel, you are creating dust.
yeah,
You are mechanically breaking those fibers free. If you breathe that dust in, yes, that is a serious hazard. You must use a respirator and proper water ventilation.
it's incredible how context changes everything. In a riverbed in China, it's a treasure. In a wall in Montana, it's a poison.
Nature doesn't deal in good or bad. Nature just arranges atoms. It's all the same elements: calcium, magnesium, iron, silica, just arranged slightly differently.
So face one, the ray, the tough tool of the Maori, the symbol of virtue. And face two, the microscopic spear that the human body simply cannot break down.
And just remember that etymology,
Hmm.
lacus nephriticus, the kidney stone.
Right, we started there.
The stone that was originally named because people believed it could heal their internal organs is the very same mineral that, in its fibrous form, destroys our internal organs.
From healing kidneys to scarring lungs, it really demands respect, doesn't it? You can't just treat it as another pretty rock.
No. You have to understand what it is. And knowledge is the difference between a treasure and a tragedy.
So next time you see a piece of greenstone or jade, take a closer look. Ask yourself, is it a gem or is it a fiber? Thanks for diving deep with us.
Pleasure.